Good afternoon, dear teachers. Let me present to you Chris Rose. As I have already introduced him, a great educator and a professional in language teaching, creative writing activities, storytelling, and everything that is connected with the contemporary language change. So, Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me say welcome to all of you. It's a cold, grey, damp morning here in the middle of England, where I am. I hope the weather is better where you are, but even if it's not, worry not, because we have enough to engage and entertain us here this morning. The world is changing. We know the world is changing. The world is changing for better, for worse in some ways. But as the world changes, language changes too. So that's our main question this morning, if you can bear with me. Hello, everybody's saying hello. I can see you all saying hello. So I'm going to hold up a cup of tea to you because it's early morning. Well, quite early morning here. So afternoon, you're saying it's morning. So I'm still drinking tea. And I'm talking about language change. Yes, how can we keep up with language change as the world and the English language changes around us? What do we do as teachers? What do we do? I'm sure we've all been in that situation from time to time when we find our students seem to know something more than we do. What do we do about that? What's correct anymore? What's incorrect? What kind of English should we be speaking? Should we be speaking all like the Queen? Even though, to be honest, not many people speak like the Queen. Should we be speaking British English, American English, Australian English? What kind of English? Now then, those are a lot of big questions, a lot of big questions there. And I don't think we will have time to answer all those questions this today. Indeed, even if there are answers to those questions. But we're just going to pick one or two or three aspects of contemporary English, which we're going to have a bit of a look at. And I hope that that will open up a pathway for us to think more about what kind of English we teach. Okay, excellent. What do you got here? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Oh, and finally, I must say, I'd love to hear your questions that you have. Any new words? English constantly invents new words. So if you've got a new word that you like, a new word that you know, or perhaps a word you've come across and you're not really sure what it means or when to use it, hold on to it and bring it up at the end, because that's the kind of thing I love, and I'd love to hear from you. Whoa, what's going on here? That's my computer being silly. We should be here, I think. So yes, these are the things I want to ask you. Of course, apologise, I've been talking too much already, because the first thing I should ask you when you get here is, how are you? Or perhaps I should say, how are you doing? Or perhaps I should say, how's it going? Or perhaps I should say, sup? Perhaps I should say, aya. Perhaps I should say, most excellent greetings. Perhaps I should say, you're right. Perhaps I should say, waman. Perhaps I should just say, pleased to meet you. Now then, I'm sure you know some of these expressions, possibly most of these expressions. And we know that in some ways they all mean pretty much the same thing. These are the kinds of things you would say the first time you see somebody, not necessarily the first time you meet them, but the first time you see them in a day. So how do we know which one to use? There's a question. Let me say that I want to introduce the idea of context first. We have a question like, how are you? Or pleased to meet you, which you'd only say the first time you meet somebody. And these are the kind of English expressions which have a very neutral register. They're fine. How's it going? Is much more informal. Something to say to a friend, to somebody you already know. Sup? What's this one for? Does anybody know this one? Sup is an abbreviation of what's up, which is an American expression. We sometimes use in British English as well. It just gets abbreviated to sup. That's the kind of thing you might hear if you were a young person in the United States, possibly in the UK. So that's the kind of language they would use. I'm rather too old to say sup to somebody. If I was back at home with some of my friends, I might say "Aya," or the one almost near that says "You're right," because those are almost dialectical expressions. They're expressions that are very typical of my hometown of Manchester. I have to go to Manchester later on this afternoon when this talk is finished. So I'll go up there and I'll see my brother-in-law and my sister, and I'll go, "You're right," because that's the way we talk to each other there. It's a geographical thing. Who would I say most excellent greetings to? I've no idea. I would only say most excellent greetings. Perhaps if I were in a Victorian novel or something. It sounds a little bit old-fashioned to me, even though it's very polite. Then we have Wagwan, which is Caribbean English. Often spoken by communities in the UK, people of Caribbean extract. It would sound very strange for me to say that because I'm a white man who's 50 years old and I have no Caribbean ancestry. However, pleased to meet you, as I said. It's the kind of thing that has a neutral register and is always very good to me. So let me repeat if you didn't catch it before, and for those of you who've just joined, pleased to meet you. Some of you are asking me what's going on. Oh, and Anastasia's pointed out that sup is used in South America and in Trinidad as well. I can see that. And somebody's saying karabati. I can't read Russian very well, I'm afraid. So yeah, this is our question. What is correct? What is incorrect? And to do that, I'm going to ask you some. Actually, I'm not going to ask you some questions just yet. I'm going to give you some examples of spoken contemporary English. Now then, these sentences that I'm going to show you, these are all real life examples of things I've heard people say over the last few months that I've just collected because they're interesting in one form or another. Let me show them to you. Oh, here we go. We've got all 8 together. Let's have a look at this first sentence. There are less words in French than in English. Do you think that's a good sentence? Do we like this? If your students came out with that sentence, would you be happy? Would you be pleased? Would you give them a big tick? Or would you put a red underlining under something? Oh, lots of people have got it already. I'm seeing, yep. Thank you, Oksana. Fewer, Nadejda has written something. Irina's written fewer. Of course, fewer. We know this. Countable, it's English. Lesson 1 or lesson, quite an early lesson. We know the difference between count and uncountable nouns. Excuse me, pouring myself another cup of tea. Difference in countable and uncountable nouns. Yes, less for uncountable things, fewer for countable things. Very good. However, do you know what? In contemporary English, the difference between less and fewer is disappearing. Now then, some people get very angry about this, saying, oh, it should be fewer. Some people think, well, so what? To be honest, as teachers, shh, don't tell the students, but this makes our life easier. Less, fewer, what difference does it make? It makes no difference in meaning, and if there's only one word, then it's easier for everybody. This is a change in contemporary English, which I'm actually quite in favour of. We have no loss of meaning. It makes life easier and clearer for everybody. Something to think about. Number 2, I'm loving the new Adele record. Can we say I'm loving? Of course, if we study properly, and I'm sure we've all studied properly, we will know that these are state verbs. The difference between state verbs and action verbs. And state verbs are not normally are not to be used in a continuous form. And again, let me tell you, that's a wonderful idea. Well, it's not a wonderful idea. It makes things very complicated for teachers and for students. And now in contemporary English, that difference between state and action verbs is largely disappearing. So you can be loving something, you can be feeling something, you can be hurting. Um, and again, this is a language change that I'm largely in favour of. Why not? It has this idea of contemporary, being around the moment, of being possibly a temporary state of affairs. I have no problem with this, and it's the kind of thing your students might know, if not least because of the slogan of a large international chain of hamburger restaurants. Yep. You seem to have that, yes, from the McDonald's. Bestest. Now then, here's one. I can see lots of you complaining about bestest already. Now then, let me tell you the story of this sentence. My bestest friend is getting married. This was a colleague of mine at the university where I work. A colleague who is has a doctorate and is a poet, and said my bestest friend. And I thought, ooh, can we say bestest? Well, obviously we know it's wrong. It's good, better, best. Best is already a superlative. We don't need to put that est on it. It's an irregular adjective. So why did my friend, who is obviously a skilled user of the English language, my friend and colleague, skilled user of the English language, why did she say bestest? In a very informal way, adding that est reinforces the sense of best. It means my very best friend, my uniquely best friend. I would still be unsure about her use of language here. I wouldn't say that myself, but I have to say that she is younger than me. It was an informal context. She's a native speaker. She wanted to be humorous. Why not? In that context, it worked fine. Number 4. If I was you, I'd quit smoking. We should know this. If I were you, shouldn't it be? Because if clause, oh, those if sentences. Don't you just love doing if sentences with your students? I don't really. Always having to remember to put the verb back one tense, and then this or extra complication is that with the first person singular, we say I were. If I were, how odd is that? How unusual. It adds an irregularity to an irregularity, a complication to a complication. And again, in contemporary English, a large tendency is to simplify, is to standardize, and that's what's going on here. Nowadays, you'll hear a lot of people say, if I was rich, if I was somewhere else. If I was in Russia, I wouldn't be here. If I was instead of if I were. Again, I have no problem with this personally. We don't lose any shade of meaning. It makes things more regular in their way. I would accept this. Okay. Where are we up to? How are you? I'm good. A lot of people don't like this. Because you should say I'm fine, not I'm good. However, maybe it's an influence of American. It came across as a very American thing before. But now a lot of saying I'm good, it's become standard English. Still sounds a bit off to me, but I have to say that once, a few months ago, somebody just came up to me and said, "How are you?" And I found myself saying, "I'm good." The words just came out of my mouth. It just happened. So, yep, I'm good. We say it. Jane has updated their picture. Number 6, let's look at now. This one is a bit odd, isn't it? Jane there. What do we do with this? Now, there's a story about this one as well. These days, instead of he or she, we often use the word there because saying he or she is a bit clumsy. Sometimes people put she stroke he. It can be a bit awkward. So we say there. We use there to mean he or she. Again, I'm fine with that. It's easy. When it becomes complicated is in a sentence like number 6, when we have this one, like Jane has updated their picture. This is a sentence taken from Facebook or one of the social media sites. I can't remember. Now, then we use our cultural knowledge to know that Jane is probably is a woman, so it should be Jane has updated her picture. But because this is being done by a robot or a computer doesn't know that Jane is necessarily a woman, so uses that gender neutral pronoun. So it's a bit odd, but it's understandable. 7 and 8. Yes, Anastasia's written. Anastasia Gabelenko. They're about gendered pronouns. We tend to, the movement is towards being gender neutral as far as possible in English. 7 and 8. Let's look at these together. What is bruvs? Just bants in it. Chill. OMG. BFFS. LOL. Who do you think would use this kind of English? Clue, not me. This is, yeah, young people's slang, isn't it? That's exactly what it is. It's fine. It will be a text message or chatter between two young people. Perhaps not best written in an examination essay, however. Teen slang, internet communication, Oksana's saying. Absolutely right. Yeah, that's where it is. Funny, innit, says Dimitri. It is hilarious. Thanks for pointing that out, Dimitri, because let's have a look at this, because these discussions about what is correct English, what is not correct, what is good, what is bad, what should we say when, this is not only a discussion for language teachers, all sorts of people in Britain are having this. I'm talking funny in it. This was a cartoon that was in a national newspaper a few months ago about the grammar wars, because us British people get very angry or worried or concerned about our language, and there are different branches. Some people who think we should speak like the Queen's English Brigade. Some people who are all in favour of complete change, like the People's Emoji Army there. Slang vandals, commandos, pedants, grammar pedants. There are all kinds of different factions of people who think things about language. I think each point of view has its reasons. But as language teachers, we know that our students are exposed to all kinds of language, so we have to be aware of these changes and use a descriptive approach, because we might not approve of some of the changes in language, but firstly, there's not that much we can do about it. Secondly, our students are going to go out into the world and hear this language anyway. Okay. Yes. Whoa. Where are we going here? No, I'm sorry, mate. Computer's a bit funny. It's jumping ahead. Yeah. So here are the 3 key things to think about when we think about these changes in language and what to teach and when to decide if something is correct or incorrect. Somebody said, I mentioned this before, I'm sorry I missed the name, context. And if I was meeting somebody very important who I don't know, I would say, how do you do? Whereas if I meet an old friend I know very well, it's, yeah, you're right, something like that. The context, the register, where are we on that degree of formality or informality? And that's not just about greetings, that's about all kinds of words. English has a very rich vocabulary, high register and low register words, and appropriacy. Is it the right thing to say in this context? When to use gender neutral pronouns, things like that. These are the 3 key things to remember when trying to decide something, if something is correct or incorrect. What's the context? Is it the right register? Is it appropriate? Okay, I'm trying to speak up a bit for Svetlana, 1 or 2 others. Perhaps if I try to turn my volume up, it might help. Let's move on quickly. I'm talking too much. World word. There are the different ways, different aspects of contemporary English, many different aspects of contemporary English. One of the ways in which we come across contemporary English is in work. And those of you who work, use English as your working language, or have to teach perhaps higher level or older students who deal with work, teaching business English, for example, will have come across examples of this. Here is one example that I came across recently. Are you reaching out enough to impact your target demographic? This was a question asked of, I think, some business consultancy to their possible clients. And it's a very interesting question, because even though I can understand that perfectly, I think even 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, I would have had no idea what this meant. Let's just take a moment, if we can, to unpack this sentence. Reach out is a verb. This has come from American. Reach out, which in British English meant either the literal meaning of reach out, like I'm reaching out now, or only you would use it in extreme emotional situations. Now it's become standard American and English, and it's creeping into British English. Reach out means to get in touch with. To impact. This is one of these examples of where a noun has become a verb. We use the verb to have an impact on, which a few years ago started to become used as a verb. People talk about things impacting on, and now it's just to impact. So it means to have an impact on, to affect, to change. Nouns into verbs still sounds a bit off to my ear, but this is happening. Demographic is, yeah, it's an adjective, but it's become a noun. People talk about the incoming, as in the things that are happening that they need to deal with. I've even heard people talk about they're happy, having a happy, not a happy day or a happy moment or a happy thing, just a happy. And there is a song that somebody told me about, which I don't know, but apparently a very popular song at the moment, which talks about somebody's has a beautiful, not a beautiful face, beautiful smile, just a beautiful. Where is your beautiful? I'm still not quite convinced about this, but there we go. It's interesting, so interesting to think about. One of the other, oh my word, excuse me. Where are we? One of the other ways you'll come across lots of contemporary English is, I'm sure, what we looked at the beginning very briefly, slang. Those of you who teach young people. Let me just have a quick look at some teen slang here. Here are 6 questions for you. Irene asked the question, mixing American and British English. We kind of do it anyway in Britain because American English has an influence on British English. I'm not, in terms of accent, we definitely don't. And spelling is the one thing, you know, Americans spell things different to British people. So my general advice is still to pick one style or another and stick with it. Let's have a look at these questions though. Let's not get distracted because I get distracted very easily, as you can tell. 6 questions. Do you ever suffer from FOMO? FOMO. Well, John asked indeed, FOMO, what does it mean? FOMO is an acronym, and FOMO is fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. When you worry that you are missing something, this is something called FOMO. Are you in the bod squad? The bod squad? I suspect if you are all school teachers and you're English teachers and you're dedicated teachers and you're here on a Saturday, you probably are in the bod squad, because the bod squad is that group of students who are very good students, serious, intelligent, like to study. Those ones, the good ones, they are called the bod squad. Life hack. Life hack. A life hack might be something like doing this this webinar. A life hack is something which helps your life. This again, let me tell you very quickly, if I can, tell you the story of how I came across the word life hack. I was in the canteen at the university where I work, and I bought a cup of tea from the cafe, and tea is quite expensive there. It's £1.50 for a cup of tea, which is quite expensive. And a student, a young person, came up to me and said, aha, what you need to do is you can buy a cup of hot water, boiling water from them for only 20p, and then bring your own tea bag. And she brings her own tea bags and puts them in 20p. And then she said, life hack. A life hack is a tip, something that makes your life easier, a way of saving money, getting around more quickly, anything that makes your life easier is called a life hack. Nice expression. What kind of crepes are you wearing? If indeed you're wearing any. This is a new word to me as well. I only found this word out last week, but crepes is a word for training shoes. If you teach young people, as you probably do, you will know that a lot of them probably wearing some kind of sports shoes, training shoes. Crepes. Not in box fresh. If they are box fresh, they are fresh from the box. That is, they are brand new, absolutely new, box fresh crepes. That's the kind of thing your teenage students will definitely like. They also might know who is paying. Somebody is paying is somebody who is Very attractive. Somebody they find attractive is Peng. I've no idea who Peng might be. Internationally Peng, Justin Bieber or somebody. I don't know. Ask them who they think is Peng. They might know. When are you on fleek? I hope you're on fleek now. I hope once you finish this sentence you are on fleek, because on fleek is when you are doing very, very well. You are top, you are feeling great, everything is going fine. You are at your best. You are on fleek. What else can be box fresh, asked Tatiana? Anything that's brand new. It's often used for clothes, music, something that's a movie, anything that's brand new. Absolutely. Guzal asks again, Peng. Peng means it's not a car, no. Peng is very, very attractive, very good looking. Peng, or very good, generally. Crepes are shoes. Yeah, asks Oksana. We are rapidly running out of time, I think. So let's have takeaways. And quite interesting, we talked about nouns into verbs very briefly before. And here's another one that's become very common, a takeaway. Up until recently, takeaway was only a verb, a takeaway, something to take away. But here is something to take away. It's become a noun. It's a very useful noun. An example, definite example of positive language change. So here are my 3 takeaways. Context, register, appropriacy, we looked at before. 3 things to remember when you're deciding if this is the right word to use, if something is correct and incorrect. Be flexible. Keep updated. So I'll give you some links of good ways you can keep updated. Don't be afraid to invent, and don't be afraid to learn from your students. Give them control. Sometimes they may know some things more quickly than you do. And invent. I mean, there's I came across the word teacherpreneurship, which was a brand new word to me, invented by, I suspect, by our colleagues here. Putting 2 words together is the kind of thing English does very well and very commonly, and it's lovely. English is an international language with many variants. There isn't one correct English. There isn't only one way to speak English. There are many ways to speak English. Find your own. Make sure it's context, register appropriate, and do play with the language and enjoy it. Akmajon asks, is pen an English word? Pengis? Yeah, I'm not really sure where it comes from. I think it's probably of Caribbean origin. It was first used a lot around London, around there, but now it's spread out the way these words do. It's still a very low register. It's a slang word only to be used in certain contexts. Talking to young people, for example. I wouldn't use it in a business or a professional context, yes. But it's quite a funny word. It sounds quite funny. Well, thank you. I feel like I've tried to cover a huge subject in a very short period of time, and I'm aware I've been talking far too quickly, and I've had to go through too much. But I hope I can that just gives you the taste of what's happening in contemporary English. Oh, I've got 2 more slides I need to show you. Is that this one? Look at this one. These are useful links for keeping updated about new words. All very good websites to look at. And I need to finish by saying thanks, cheers, much obliged, or because I like to think that we know each other a little bit now, we can be a bit informal, so I will just say ta very much.
Chris, thanks a lot for your wonderful inspirational speech. I hope that we all can feel on fleek after this. And there are lots of questions coming. Great. Yeah, so everyone is asking about slang versions and when can we teach it, and what kind of target audience is English?
Yeah, when can you teach slang? I mean, there's a whole question is, should you teach slang? Because given that slang changes so quickly, that's one of the features of it. If a word that you might know might be out of date in 6 months' time, and your students will think, old-fashioned. So I would say slang, I usually keep it as a fun activity to do in the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes of a class, or just have one kind of a fun class towards the end of term, maybe, and when we look at some slang expressions, I'll ask the students to bring in their own expressions, so show what they know, because they might be more up to date than I am. And if you don't know, and often I don't know, make use of one of those websites. There's one called Urban Dictionary, which is quite good. don't be afraid to Google things. Or be
Yeah, this
careful.
one is great.
Sometimes they're rude, yeah. But yeah, that's a good way of doing it, I think. Some of you asking for links. They're there.
So, thanks later, so our teachers can see this in the presentation. So another question was concerned about your own attitude towards this mixing of different versions of English, about mixing, working like with Franglish, English, Spanglish, and so on. How do you feel about this?
It's context register appropriacy. It's if you're speaking to somebody who's going to understand these expressions, remember that, I mean, most communication in English now is not between native speakers of English. It's Russian people speaking to Brazilian people. It's Japanese people speaking to Spanish people. So any kind of British English is kind of fading, and as long as you can understand each other is the basic thing, and then make the right impression on one another and bring in some international expressions, that's fine. But make sure that you can be understood, because these things like Chinglish or Franglais they're not always universally comprehensible. So think about the context always. But generally, I'm in favour of change. It keeps the language fresh and new and exciting, and develops creativity, as somebody's written there, I think.
Yeah, so now see there's a question about your written works, and can you just tell us where we can find more of your ideas and maybe lectures, because as you see, all teachers are highly interested in your charismatic lecture and what to do next with this information.
I've never actually written about language change. I've given courses on it and talks, but I've never written. I don't think I've ever written, as far as I can remember, I haven't written an article about language change. But do look at those links that I sent you, because they have good things about language change and language development. And I'm speaking here today on behalf of Transform LT and Nile. And if you look at the Nile website, there are some good things on their blog about language change. Yeah.
And about Nile, can you tell us more about this organization, whether it provides some webinars for the teachers online?
Yeah. Nile do webinars for teachers, online courses, and courses in the UK as well as abroad. Have a look at the website or follow the link, the contact there for any more information. But they do webinars. Just one-off webinars every now and then, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, and it was definitely a great piece of information. We have to chew on this, I think, for a while, in order to prepare ourselves. Yes, in order to prepare ourselves for the changes in English, because no one is more concerned than English teachers. Yeah.
I don't know. In some ways, I think we like to think of ourselves as guardians of the language, but we can be quite experimental in the way we teach. But we do guard the language, and language is very important, as we know. So we're right to be concerned about these things.
Okay, Chris, if you can just stick around a little bit more, so you can go to the main chat, so where people are discussing things and still asking you questions. Okay, so thanks a lot for your wonderful presentation today. Okay, just a second.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.